Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to share your story on a podcast, maybe just in person to a friend or in a speech? And halfway through, you're like, crap, I'm not telling the story anymore. My body and mind are reliving it. Maybe your chest got tight, your throat closed. Maybe you heard yourself rambling and thought, oh my goodness, I lost them. I lost myself. We've all done it. Your story starts as that moment of truth, a sentence with a real power, but then suddenly you're knee deep in those memories that you never meant to unpack. Here's the truth that nobody tells podcasters. Your audience doesn't want the whole story. They want that moment that changed you, the door. They don't want the entire house. And you deserve to tell your story in a way that feels safe, intentional, and aligned. Not draining, not re-traumatizing, and not that spiral that gets you stuck back in those patterns. Today, we're going to dive deep into exactly how to do that. How to take that anchor line from the last episode and shape it into a narrative that hooks your listeners, builds trust, drives sales, and protects your nervous system all at the same time. Are you ready to do this? Let's go. Welcome to Podcast Story Selling. I'm Jen Dragonette. Here, we use your story to lead with connection before strategy. So your podcast doesn't just grow, it converts. And your business actually pays you without hustling harder. And the best part, we get to do it with ease because we focus on the right effort. Now, I want you to think back to a moment that you shared something. You know, that vulnerable, almost like feels like you're lifting a weight off your shoulders at the same time as it's punching you in the gut and bringing you back into those moments. Maybe you shared it on your podcast. Maybe it was on social media. Maybe just a conversation with your bestie. And afterwards, your whole system felt flooded with all those past emotions. You kept replaying it in your head like, oh my goodness, I overshared. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this. They're going to think something differently of me. I went too far. Take it down, screaming. And your whole body is reacting all over again. This is because you felt so exposed instead of connected. You felt super shaky and off instead of empowered that you made it through. You felt like you handed someone your entire past when all they really needed was one or two sentences to be able to connect and understand what you're going through. Trust me, I've been there. I am the queen of story diarrhea, as I call it, diarrhea from the mouth. And I've overshared and I know this and I catch myself in this. Like, how much do I give? How much do I not give? How far is too deep? When they ask me questions, how much deeper should I go? And I've done this. I was sitting at a coffee shop helping someone come up with their signature talk and these little pieces. And then they started asking about me and everything made sense to them because I started sharing. And then I went from sharing to oversharing to this is too deep to having nightmares that evening about living the trauma over and over again. Now, what happened is that they learned a lot about me. They learned too much. I went too far, but I was also in a loving situation. Whereas if I had gone and shared this to somebody who didn't know me, who didn't want to connect with me deeper, that would have been a problem. This is part of the reason why I love podcasting. This is one of the reasons why I have a secondary podcast under a alter ego name, and I wrote a book in an alter ego name because I needed to just get all of that out. And podcasting and writing books are super powerful ways to do that. But what happens, you have to judge your audience. There's the new audience that needs one or two sentences to be able to start connecting the dots. There's your deeper friendships that need a little bit deeper connection where they can kind of see a little more of the story. There's your therapist that might want to see that whole story. And then there's your vivid imagination where you just share and spill the tea on your private secret podcast or in a book where you're just letting it all out and people read it and they respond to you and they're like, there's no way this is real. There's no way that this happened. How is that possible? But what is the main shift here is you have to understand how that story fits into the situation that you are currently in. How much do you need? How connected is this? We came up with those pieces last week in the podcast about those powerful sentences. And like in my signature talk, it was 5 years ago, I woke up with a plan for the day, but I didn't take the action. Like I was planning on exiting. I didn't. I took this step. Here's how I was empowered. Here's what changed for me. weaving in some of those little anchor moments throughout the more positive experience. So people are leaning in for the trauma story, but they're seeing the empowered side of it. So I'm not sitting there reliving it over and over again. I'm not forcing people to see the full darkness, but I am connecting with them on emotional levels. So the moment that I realize that that one sentence or those couple sentences carry more power than the entire story, my business, my signature speech, my keynote, the way that I wrote my book, everything changed. That's why this podcast changed. That's why I'm shifting into an audience that's changing, that doesn't want the hustle, that's been through some of the big T and little t trauma, that is still showing up in patterns. This is where my energy changed. This is where the shift becomes yours too, where you don't have to relive the trauma, but you can also bring people in by sharing some of your trauma in a way that people can say, hey, that's my story too. If they can do it, so can I. So here's what I want you to think about is like the 3-part arc of your story. You're not sharing your whole timeline. You're not giving them every single painstaking detail down to the colors of your clothes or what you were smelling or what you were seeing. Yeah, we want those emotional connections. We want that depth, but this is not the place for it. We only need those 3 emotional lean in. Oh, that's my story. Because you're not being vague. You're giving them real pieces that even if their story isn't exactly like yours, they can say, that's my story too. So you've got to give them the before, the who you were before that shift, what you believed, what you were struggling with. And this is where the audience starts to see themselves. Like maybe you don't see yourself in that you had a exit plan for today, but maybe you see yourself in exiting and saying, I don't want to be a podcaster anymore. I don't want to be a YouTuber anymore. I don't want to do this business anymore. Let me just go put my head down and work for the man. So whatever it is, as I say, I had a plan for the day to exit. What was your exit? That's the before. That's what you're feeling. Then you anchor in your second line of like, what was your shift? That anchor, that moment that something cracked open, that moment you felt your feet move under you and your feet touch the ground. That's the hook. This is the big main heartbeat and connection that you're looking for. I had a plan for the day. That was the before, the shift. I still did my morning routine and somebody on a podcast inspired me and I started a podcast that same day. It gave me that glimmer of hope. That was my shift. Then you have to think of the after, how that moment shaped you as the person you are right now. What did it teach you? Why are you showing up the way that you do? Why are you teaching the way you are? Why are you doing the things you're doing? And that's how it ties back to your work and what you do today. This ties back into why podcasting is so important to me and why I believe that podcasting is a healing modality, why I truly believe that it is a way to build a community like no other thing out there, why I truly believe that this is about people first business growth, people first connection, because doing it alone, being an entrepreneur is lonely, and we are here to fight the epidemic of loneliness and entrepreneurship. And podcasting can really do that for you. But if you can get this before, the shift and the after with those emotional pieces of your story where they can see glimmers of themselves, man, it's simple, clean, no spiraling, no trauma dump, and they are hooked. You have hooked them in. So where does this mean? This means you're vulnerable, but you're not oversharing. The vulnerability invites them to connect your story to theirs. That's the beauty of it. You're not giving them all the details because then they can't see themselves in it. You're giving them the key pieces so they can see themselves. And when you overshare, it demands emotional labor on yourself and puts you back in there. It re-traumatizes you. It messes with your system. It heightens your sensation. It raises your cortisol. It does all the things you don't want it to do. Vulnerability is the truth that really shaped me. Here's the truth. This is how it shaped me. When you start oversharing, this is the detail of every piece of the pain. Please hold it with me. Let's be victims together. Let's do this. Let's rebond over the trauma. Your listeners can't always follow the depth of that wound. but they can follow you into the meaning of that story in that moment of that feeling that the shift happened, in the pain that you were feeling before you made that shift. And that meaning is what is created through that clarity and intention and restraint in sharing your big T and little t traumas in your storytelling. Every business can use storytelling. Some businesses are great for it. Like, I always think of Nike, just do it. Just do it. Like, that is so powerful. Like, in my mind, I see it, just do it. I don't want to take this action. Well, just do it. I don't want to feed myself today. Just do it. I don't want to drink water to do it. Just do it. And it always comes back to Nike. There was a vulnerability because at some point they're realizing that that trauma, that piece is like, the athletes that wear these, the people that wear their clothes and their shoes, that first step is the hardest step. Just do it. We'll do it with you. It's an golden moment of how a piece can tell a whole story. So you've got to keep your audience inside the story, not inside the pain. This is where most of you are going wrong, and I did it too. You tell them the hardest moments like you're still living it. And maybe you are. Like, it's a hard month for me right now. I shed so many clients that, yes, I'm still paying all my bills. Yes, everything is getting paid off every month. Yes, I still made my mortgage, but there's not much extra for the holidays this year because I shedded what wasn't aligned. But here's where things are building is I'm shifting into the things that are aligned, which is bringing me more joy and happiness and allowing me more space to go deep and connect with people. Your listeners don't want to live inside that pain of, oh my God, am I going to pay my bills? I can't pay enough for, like, Christmas is not as good this year. You're not living in that. You want to go through the transformation. You want to see how you can go from how you feel to the transformation. You don't want to live in my pain. If your story makes them worried for you, they stop hearing your message of how you're going to help them. If your story makes them root for you, they're going to follow you everywhere. Because when you can connect with somebody and say, hey, I see that part of your story in me, way to go, they become your cheerleader. And you know what you've just done? You have just given them a piece of hope. This is why this anchor line works so well in all of your marketing and inside your keynote speeches and inside your podcast, because it holds the emotion without asking you to hold my trauma. We're not trauma bonding here. We're connecting. We're going deeper. We're leaning in and saying, me too. I see your story. I see how you moved through it. I have hope. So what belongs and what doesn't belong? What belongs is the belief that you carried before this all happened. The moment that it shifted, that one sentence that you pulled from last week that changed your freaking life. The lesson of how you now teach others to move through that faster and how that bridges into your work. What we don't want. Here's your do nots. Every detail. I don't want to know all the details. Every step of the backstory. I don't want this to flood my nervous system into some sort of trauma. I don't want to talk about anything that's unresolved that you can't move through without it really festering in your body, and anything you're not ready to say out loud, unless you're ready to say it out loud on a secret podcast under a secret name where you just need to get it out, because I feel that's very healing. So you get to protect your story. You get to protect your energy. And your audience is going to feel the difference. They don't have to go through every painstaking detail to connect with you. Those lines, those powerful anchor lines, they can see their story in you. They build the story in their mind around what that could mean, which means they can relate better to you, which means your story of triumph is going to be their story of triumph. So as you weave this back into your business, it becomes natural. Your story's not separate from your business because you are the business. You are the brand. This is the reason that you do what you do. Share the small moment that shaped your mission and why you're doing what you're doing. Then show them how that moment becomes the lens of your work. When you do that, people don't just understand your offer. They feel it. They're emotionally tied to it. And that's what sells. So here's your 15 action step. We're going to build that 3-part arc right now. Are you ready? Set a timer, because we're going to start using that anchor line from last week. Didn't do last week's episode to find your anchor lines. That's fine. You can write this down. You can pause me and then go back to the first episode of this new podcast, which I will link in the show notes, so that you can get these pieces, because these are all going to build on each other over the next few weeks. Okay, so I want you to, for around 5 minutes, I want you to talk about the 5. Again, these are brain dump. This is where you can traumatize yourself again for a minute and then we shift out of it. But I want you to write 3 to 5 sentences describing who you were before the shift. Focus on the beliefs, the patterns, the emotions, the feelings, the how your body felt, the how your mind felt, the thoughts, the patterns, the things that you were saying over and over again. The second 5 minutes, I want you to start placing your anchor line in here. So now you have your before, now your anchor line. Write the 2 sentences describing those moments in that story that actually matter, not the details, not the meanings, but what are those anchor lines? I had a plan and didn't take it. Here's why. Podcasting became a safe way to make friends when I wasn't allowed to have friends in my life. Things like that. What are those moments where I don't have to tell you about the abuse that led up to me not being allowed to have friends? I just got to tell you that it became this reason. You can read between the lines and however you want to do that. The last 5 minutes, I want you to write 5 sentences about the lesson, the transformation, and how that moment connects to your mission and your work today. Because if you can connect that in, mine is, hey, I wanted to do this. The arc was I became a podcaster. The after is I have built a business that I am self-sufficient financially and emotionally and physically, where I could move out of this toxic relationship, give up everything, walk away with 0, start my life over, and live in a safe manner. That's my story. That's my before, my shift, and my after. And that meeting the podcast is where I built the friendships. The after, now I have friends, a home, I'm happy, I'm working on being healthy, and here we go. This is your story blueprint. If you use it in your podcast, your speaking, your book, your interviews, your messaging, guess what? Sales come naturally. You're not selling, you're story selling now. You are giving your people what they need, that emotional connection to see themselves in your story and see your solution as their glimmer of hope, as that beacon of hope. As I say, your story is someone's life raft. Wrote the best-selling book about it. Let your story be the life raft to your business and to getting yourself out of the hustle. So that is your 15-minute action plan. If you need to go back to last week, go back to last week. I will put the link directly in the show notes so that you can just click back on over. But let's build that story because that's what connects. And if you're struggling with this, grab a free CPR audit. I'm going to give you 30 minutes of my time looking at your stuff. Let's just get this moving. Let's move this forward. And there's plenty of things that if that audit goes well and you want to work deeper with me, I will offer it to you. If you don't want to work deeper with me, that's fine too. We will just spend 30 minutes together. I'll get to know you because again, people first podcasting. I want to talk to you. It won't be a hard sell after the 30 minutes. I can guarantee you that. If you want more to work longer with me, then great. If you don't and you get what you need in those 30 minutes, it's free and it moves your needle forward. So podcastcpr.com because we're going to get clarity on our people and our purpose and our passions so we can make more revenue. All right, now go out, make today amazing because you are beautiful, you are wonderful, you are worthy, and your story deserves a microphone. Now go do the thing.